check, check. Hello, my name is Jeremy. This is Red Beans Recording, and my microphone is very low. Hello, my name is Jeremy. This is Red Beans Recording, and today we have a very special Ableton walkthrough of a remix that I did for the artist Carter off his EP called Tranga. The track is called GG. The label contacted me a while ago and was like, hey, would you like to do a remix? And I was like, sure. And they were like, would you like to do it on the OP1? And I was like, I'd love to, but you've provided me with a lot of really fantastic stems or audio files, the chunks that make up the song, and I want to use a lot of them. And if I did it on the OP1, I would basically fill up all of my tracks and not have any room to make any additional music. So OP1's not fantastic for like long form stems that you want to like all stack on top of each other. So I ended up doing it at Ableton. They were like, cool. I was like, cool. And I want to take you through the remix. Since we don't have an OP1 performance for this, you haven't really heard the song, so I'm going to take this opportunity to put something on the screen that has links to the original and my remix. I guess once you've gotten a chance to take a listen to it, maybe you come back? Okay, let's do that now. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully that was an enjoyable experience for you. Okay, so let's get jumping into this. I did a lot of preparation for this walkthrough because it turns out that I was at the end of my CPU's rope, and when I was using Audition to record and OBS to record, the whole thing was just crapping out. So I've done a lot of freezing of tracks, which in Ableton parlance means you've turned the real-time synthesizer and MIDI data into audio, and that's what these tracks look like here with these little things here, and they're all frozen here. But don't worry, we'll go through what's going on with them and try to give you some cool information if that's what you're into. So we're gonna start at the top. So this entire drum bed here was what was supposed to be the, this entire drum bed here was supposed to be the drums. And what it turned out to be is more of a drum bed that sits in the back and provides sidechain and toms and some other stuff like that. So let's dive in. This kit right here, this is actually their drum stem. They had a really nice kit that they used, so I just layered that in there. Let's see what's going on here. This is the same drum stem here as up here. It's one of the little fill sections, but I wanted it to stick out a bit more, so I put some overdrive on it. And I also took that last snare hit and warped it way out using the beats mode here to give it the artifacting sort of sweep back and forth that you hear. Like it should be technically like over here. It should just be a snare hit, just a normal snare hit, but I took it and warped it way out. Fun stuff. All right. So all of these kits that you see are going to be things that you, if you have Ableton 9 Suite, will have access to. If you want to pause the video and look at the name of the kit, you can go grab it. I also did add a lot of custom percussion to these kits because sometimes they were just useless hits that I didn't really want, or I would go in and change the volume levels or replace something out, or add a reverb to a hit, or in this case, you can see there's a filter delay. You know, I have no shame in using presets or preset kits, but it's always good to, you know, don't depend on them as they are. Like go in, make adjustments. Don't be afraid to dig into the drum rack individual things. You can make groups out of these and put effects on those groups. So in this case, like on this snare clap thing here, you know, I added some reverb and this filter delay to give it that sort of. So that's without the filter delay. That's with the filter delay. It's kind of like a little dubby thing going on. Just something because my brain told me to do it and I did it. And that's how a lot of this works. Another Ableton kit. This one's called Jarble because sure. This one I was using primarily for its hi-hats and snares. I actually made a custom snare here. It's a pretty good snare, but I wanted a sort of just a filtered noise hit. Just one oscillator using noise with a low pass filter and a very, very short decay. Together, you get the nice clap of the snare noise, and you also get the filtery kind of sweepy down thing of this. It's funny because all this stuff is just sitting way back in the mix, and you probably won't really even hear it much when you listen to the master version of this track. But I felt like I wanted to do it at the time, and it ended up in the final mix. So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Can't even do anything about it. You just do a thing. All right, this is my sidechain kick and also the deep kick that sits throughout the kit. Very, very deep, low sub kind of kick drum, and just dropped in a simpler, and all of my side chaining is coming off of this. And if you don't know what side chaining is, it's when a signal like a kick drum is fed into a dynamics processor or literally anything that accepts a sidechain signal. And every time this kick drum or whatever the source modulator is, it will do something to a parameter of the thing that you are sending it to. So the probably most common use for it is sidechain compression, which became super, super popular in dance music, where the kick makes everything kind of like pump every time it hits. If you listen to electronic music in the last God knows how long, like you've heard sidechain compression. I used a lot of sidechain compression throughout this, and then the mastering engineer, who was very kind enough to provide me some mix advice, was like, you got too much sidechain compression. So I dialed a lot of it back, but you'll see the compressors throughout as we go through the melodic instruments. I love tom fills. I love this tom, little baby whale here. And this is like a shorter version of it from another sample set. I guess at this point, since it's getting obvious that this is, I wouldn't really put this into the synthwave genre, but I was listening to a lot of Brother Tiger and Big Black Delta when I was working on this, and I really wanted to go for something kind of like that. I don't think I achieved either of their sounds, but these sort of 80s drums and tom fills, and as you'll see later, these big synth pads are part of especially Brother Tiger's sound, and I was really trying to go for that. We have a little supporting drum loop, and then the last part of this drum bed is classic drum loop that's been saturated to death. I've added some auto pan, which moves the drum or the sound that it's applied to left and right in the stereo field. Not a lot of left and right, but gives you a sense of what's going on there. A filter, you can see it sweeping up. I love filtered saturation and filtered overdrive. The simple delay here is what's providing the echo sound. And then another saturator after the auto filter because I just wanted it to be really gritty and nasty. Some reverb to push it back in the mix so it wasn't so dry. And a glue compressor that is slamming it, all squishing it down with the reverb and delay. So it's this really squashed tight thing, and I use that as a big fill throughout. After I got this whole remix home and was messing around with it and was like, I want to take this more synthwave, I want to take it more Brother Tiger, I was like, I know I have some good 80s drums lying around, and those are a really big part of making the sound work. Why don't I start putting those in? So I found this pack called 80s Electronic Drum Pack. It's by a dude or person named Data Drive. I'll put the links in the description. It's a really, really, really good drum pack if you want this sort of like classic 80s drum sound. And I did, and it really, really, really provided. So these became the main drums. So crunchy. And then with the other drums, we get kind of this drum bed behind them. But these 80s drums here, this channel right here, is the main drums of the piece. And I just made a custom drum kit with what I wanted to do, stacking some kits. I added some high-end, actually mid-highs, around 4K. Generally, I wouldn't do this, but I knew that this is where the bite for these drums was going to come out, so I wanted them to sort of push through the mix a bit more. Some bit reduction to downsample them. A lot of the original 80s drum machines were like 12-bit, 10-bit, something like that. So I didn't actually mess with the bit reduction, but I did downsample a bit to give them a little bit of crunchiness. They're very clean, crunchier. And then finally, I used a neutron exciter. This is from iZotope. This is one of their one of the parts of the neutron plugin. You can apply them separately or all together. This is a multiband exciter, and what it does is it has 4 sort of saturation modes, what they call retro, tape, tube, and warm, and you can X, Y between them as you want. Pretty cool. You can blend them together depending on where your control is. Let me bring this on over here. Come here. Boop. And then you can also set the amount that you want, the dry wet for each thing. And you can choose based on the frequency spectrum with 20 hertz and 20K hertz up here, what part of the frequency bands you want to affect. And you can choose different saturation types and different blends for each one. And of course, you can also set the breakpoint. So I wanted to use saturation to kind of gel parts of these together, and I wanted different saturation for each section. So you'll see that I'm using a different mode for different parts and different amounts of blend. And it's a subtle effect. It's not so subtle. Never mind. But that's there. I had to grab my Phil Collins toms. These, I believe, probably came from the Data Drive 80s pack as well. And they are all throughout. I love big gated toms, and there's no processing on this except for some volume automation using the utility plugin. When I've decided what I want my track volume to be overall, when I found a good level, if I need to automate any volume throughout the track, I use the utility plugin in Ableton. I do not automate this right here. And the reason for that is if I ever want to make another adjustment to the overall level of the track as mixing is going on and things rebalance, then all of a sudden I have automation on my main volume control, and that's not good. I want to do the automation in something that doesn't affect the main volume control. So set your main volume here where you normally would. And then if you want to do volume automation throughout, grab a utility plugin for Ableton. This is what it's for. It's got volumes, it's got mono, stereo. You can do some stuff. You can change the panning and the stereo width and phase if you need to do that. So it's a lot of the same controls you have over here, but if you automate the volume, you know, going throughout or whatever, it won't affect your overall track volume, and that's very, very good. So that's my quick tip for that. This bass stem, it's bass. This bass stem is from them. It's really low in the mix. It's it's like an electric or acoustic bass that's been amped, very natural sound. Got a lot of good natural low end. I actually didn't have this in the mix at all for a while, but then decided to bring it back to go with the synth bass, which is right down here. You can see that I used to have a compressor on here. I actually used to have a bunch of stuff. I was doing all kinds of crazy shit with auto filtering and trying to do multi-racks, but I was like, no, go away. So that went away. And I had this compressor on here. It was doing sidechain compression. I'll give you a taste of what that looks like. Remember that kick that I showed you up there? Well, it's pulling, every time that kick hits, it's causing the compressor to kick in. And you can hear it kind of pump. I'm gonna turn this off. All right, so that's more natural. It was very clear from the mastering engineer's feedback that I was using too much compression across the board. And I really found his advice useful, because he was like, all right, well, in these situations, I would suggest reducing your compression by half on everything. And I did, nervously, and lo and behold, it actually helped a ton. Like, the whole mix started to breathe and sound better. And you know, in my mind, I wanted everything to pump and be really upfront, and that's generally how I try to mix. If you listen to music, it's not always all pumped and upfront, even though it may sound like that. It's hard to explain, but like, I was using too much compression. I pulled back on my compression, and it helped the mix. So thank you, Bob. Thank you for letting me know. All right, this is the synth bass. And like I said, I started this at work. So I was using only Ableton stuff. We're gonna go ahead and loop this so we can listen to it while we talk. All right. So I was using only stuff I had at work, and that was this analog saw bass preset, which again, if you have Suite, it'll be in there. It's using the Tension plugin, which is actually a string, like a Car Plus Strong thing. I'm not really sure how they managed to get the sound out of it, but it's actually a pretty good analog saw bass sound. And then I got it home and I was like, I really want to try to bring some more quote-unquote retro sounds into this. A few months ago, I had purchased the Korg WaveStation and M1 plugins because they were on super sale, and these things are amazing. I love these. The Korg M1 and WaveStation are two very, very classic digital synths from Korg. If you were to buy them in real life, they'd be either huge boxes or a very hard to program rack mount device. And they're full of presets and sounds that you would recognize from a whole swath of music. Like there's a preset that's basically just the synth line from Human Behavior by Bjork. It's got the Seinfeld bass in it. There's a whole series of classic sounds that come from these synths. And while I didn't want to put those really, really recognizable sounds in there, I knew that if I stuck in these synths, I would probably get a little bit of that retro synthwave feel that I wanted for this mix. So I stacked this WaveStation bass on top of the other bass. I layered it, and we'll go hear what the original sounds like. And then I added this on top. So some nice width to it. It's not as aggressive as the other bass, but it does have a nice high end and width to it, and together they stack really, really nicely. I'm using this overdrive only in the high ends to bring out the sort of the attack and the brightness of the bass, because I wanted it to cut through the mix and hang out with these 80s drums up in that high end. Some of the other stems that were sent to me was this electric piano stem, which is sort of the main chord progression thing for the original song. I definitely wanted to keep it, but as I was working through this, I felt like maybe I was relying on it too much. So I used Ableton's Convert Harmony to New MIDI track thing. This is basically something that will analyze audio, either solo melodic content, harmonic melodic content, or drum percussive content, and try to turn it into a MIDI track for you. And it will actually try to assign a instrument that it thinks will match what it originally was. It's kind of an interesting way to extract harmonic content from things and turn them into MIDI that you can then manipulate more. So I did that and then created another instrument to stack with it. And the two together sound like this. All right, so that rhythmic gating sound that you hear is part of the rack on the master group channel thing here. This is the electric piano sounds run through a longish reverb with a ton of overdrive and a rhythmic auto filter set on the 8th note. So if we turn these off, we'll hear it step by step. So there's the sound that you recognize from the two pianos. Completely wash them out with reverb, blast them with overdrive, and then run them through a rhythmic bandpass filter. Why? I don't know. I just wanted to do it. With that, and at the stem was this cute little rhythm piano thing that they sent. It's just hanging out in there to give some interest to certain parts. Sometimes it's louder. These guitars were part of the original stem set that they sent me. Really, really cool sound. Panned hard left and hard right. They had a wet stem and a dry stem, and I just stuck them in there and was like, go this way. And since it's basically a double track, you kind of get this just gigantically wide guitar sound. It might be too wide, honestly, but sometimes I like to really push the stereo field. One of the other stems that they sent me was this guitar strum, which I ran through a very large reverb, washed it out, and then ran it through an overdrive and an auto pan. So it originally sounded like this, which fit the intimate nature of the original song really, really nicely, but I wanted a ton of texture and layers, so I did this to it. This channel also got used as a sort of a weird background moaning transition sound sometimes. And that's part of the vocal stems and then it goes into the guitar stem. Because that's something I like to do. All right, so here's where we start getting into some of the hooks. I know it's taken us a very long time, I'm sorry. But for the chorus, I wanted really, really big, sort of classic, almost evangelist synth pads, go from sort of the intimate nature of the verse into this big open chorus. So that's one of them, and you can. This is a stock Ableton sound. So if you have Sweet 9, you can use this as well. Look it up. It's called Chord Sweeper. Up here we have an instance of the Max for Live instrument called Poly, which gives us a nice grit to everything. This instrument is not doing a polyphonic thing. It is doing this accent here at the end. So we have that gritty bass thing. We have a stack of an Ableton preset and the M1 synth again, doing the Korg M1 doing a really nice classic pad sound. And then we have this guy all together. We've saturated it, we've added some phaser, taken out all that low muddy stuff in the end and given it some sidechain compression. And then finally, down here we have, I'm gonna unfreeze this guy real quick just because I haven't shown off this particular synth yet. This is the Predator. If I had to pick one VST for myself personally that I would always use, it would be this one. It's just for like classicer sounds, that's a word, right? Classicer. It really, really delivers, and there's a great set of presets for basses and pads, and the ambient banks in this are some of my favorite sounds from any VST ever. So we had our big sweepy sustain sounds. So we had our big sweepy sustained sounds for the chorus, but I also wanted some other stuff going on behind the vocals. So we have this pizzicato sound, which makes its way in a few times. It's from the M1, which I'll show down here in a second. And it's actually sort of playing a derivation of the main melody.
A little maybe I'm a little crazy and little shady, but
All right, so there's two verses in this, and I wanted the second verse to have some additional sounds. I have two M1s. It's not really much to look at, but nothing matters except for the Seinfeld bass, which I don't know how to play the thing from Seinfeld. No, that's not it. Anyways, this is the M1. It has a ton of sounds. I love the organization system for it. It's just a joy to work with, mostly. And it's got a ton of really, really useful sounds. So that's part of the interest here in the second verse. The other thing is this other M1 pizzicato. I don't think this is the same sound, is it? Okay, wow. See, sometimes when you get working and you just start dropping plugins in to make a sound that's in your head, you don't realize that you already have the exact same sound in another channel. So great job. This is the exact same pizzicato sound that's up here. It's frozen because I don't want my CPU to be sad.
yourself into your mind. Treat me right, but I don't wanna die.
And that's raw out of the M1. Pretty nice, pretty nice. Okay, so this thing comes in after the chorus. There's a section after each chorus where the beat kind of like hangs out, and I needed another voice to go with it. Originally, this had all been done with chopped up versions of the main vocal, but I ended up making this weird thing out of a couple different samples. So I'm pretty sure this Juno 106 bass thing is an Ableton preset. And then I have this weird vocal thing that's actually kind of not even, I think it's like a 7th off or a 4th. Let's see. It's like a 4th. So it's playing a sort of a harmony with this guy, and you have them stacked on top of each other playing the same line. Some distortion from our good friend Trash. Trash. That's what it sounds like without it. Distortion. Some chorus to give it some stereo interest, some reverb to make it. Ring out. Some very, very light side compression. Hardly anything going on with gain reduction there. Thanks, Bob. And then some, again, kicking out the muds on that because it was... listen to that. I don't need any of that information. So that goes away. This is where things got really stupid. I'm gonna unfreeze this friendo here. When I was working at this at work, I was like, okay, the chorus has gotten really big. This is going in this 80s synthwave direction. What do I do? What do I do for like the big peaking melody? And I'm like, the only answer is pan flutes. And I don't know why I thought that this was a good idea, but it stuck. So there's a stack here as well. I went online and searched for like really classic pan flute samples because I knew there was a few synths from back in the day that had really distinctive pan flute waveforms in them. And I ended up with this one from a Yamaha TG500. And it really does nail the sound I was going for. And then it's stacked with a marimba very quietly just to give it a little bit of attack. Yeah, it's got this isn't doing anything. This is not doing anything. Some bit reduction, some glue to glue the whole things together, to compress the two together, and some delay. Or some echo, if you will. So, ended it up really hard there. All right, next. This says M1 piano, but it's really massive. Originally it was the M1 Classic House piano. I didn't like the sound. I tried to make it work. I didn't like it. So I found a preset in Massive called Chorus Plug that did the job for me. And that comes in later in the big chorus section as well. Just doing a tiny bit of reinforcement. Cool. All right, so in this section here, we've just come off the main chorus. We've had a little breakdown, and we've had that massive piano thing going. I wanted reinforcement, so I added some of the orchestral strings in staccato mode from Ableton's library. They literally never come in anywhere else.
Drop that shit.
Layers on layers and layers. I added another muted guitar from the actually pretty usable guitar and bass presets that come with Ableton Suite. I ran it through Trash for some distortion and the Chris Lord Algae guitars thing, which always give a little bit of vibe. Just I wanted a little bit of delay and that kind of whatever the hell that plugin does to things. I've frozen it because these are really CPU intensive and I don't really want to destroy us with buffering sounds. All right, this next section is all stuff that was recorded either from sampling the WaveStation plugin to save CPU or recorded directly from my Access Virus. I went through so many stages with this remix, and I knew that I wanted to put Virus in here because it has a much nicer sound than a lot of the virtual instruments that I use in the box. So I did a few passes over a couple days. It's the same melody that pan flute's playing, but I wanted to Emerson, Lake, and Palmer the hell out of it, so that's what's going on there. What else we got? We got a pad. All right, so just as up at the top, we had like the pizzicato and some stuff like that that was supporting the chorus sections with rhythmic interest. There's a bunch of that down here too. And it's a good time to talk about whether you can freeze a track or not. Sometimes in Ableton, it will tell you can't. And the main reason you can't, for me, is because there's a compressor that is doing sidechain compression. This is it's considered a live input. You know, it's grabbing audio from a drum channel up there, and it doesn't want to freeze that, because if you change the MIDI track that is sending this audio and it's frozen, it won't know what to do with it anymore. It won't be right. So it won't let you freeze a track if you have a sidechain compressor on it. The workaround for that is to take the channel that you want to freeze, take the sidechain compressor and any plugins that you have after it, group it into a group, and grab the sidechain compressor and any other plugins after it, put them on the group channel, and freeze the channel that's underneath. So these plugins here, this compressor, delay, and utility plugin, used to be here, but I grouped it and stuck them on the group channel, and that allowed me to freeze the channel that actually had the Ableton plugin and the M1, which was taking up a bunch of CPU, and still have all of these effects going on. I really like marimba sounds a lot, and this M1 down here is doing a marimba sound, and then there's a layered Ableton sound with it. This overdrive here is what's giving it that nasty kind of grit to it, and then a tiny bit of sidechain compression to help it pump with the kick, and some delay. This is a stereo effect delay. I'm not using it actually as a echo. It's being used to spread the stereo field a little bit. Not a lot, only 27%. That's what it would sound like if it was at 100. Just a tiny bit. So that thing's going on there. This ARP also does runs to bring us into different sections, these big chromatic runs here. And together, they provide the second part of the recipe for the chorus. There's a tiny, tiny, simple Ableton sound, Ableton analog sound here, hitting on the offbeats, on the 2 and the 4, just the 2 maybe. It's pretty, probably can't really hear it that well. So it's on the downbeat mostly. Kind of like a tonal crash cymbal, I guess. Oh my gosh, we're finally at vocals, holy crap.
Hold your guns, hold your breath, a little maybe I might.
First, I did a ton of processing to it and ended up backing off on all of that. So Nectar here is just doing a tiny, tiny bit of pitch correction. The original song was really, really intimate, and his vocals worked perfectly for it. But in the context of this sort of bigger dance track, I wanted to kind of make it more pitch perfect, and that's what this is doing. It's really not doing much at all. Took out some of the low mids and then slapped another de-esser on it. This Vox aux stem here is a collection of almost all the background vocals that they sent over, and I did a bunch of stacking and processing to them, but for the purpose of this walkthrough, I had to flatten them all. So there was a lot of chopping and processing and moving things around to support different sections of the song. And they're sitting there in the background making things sound awesome. I love vocoders. There is a vocode channel I will vocode things every chance that I get. A vocoder is a plugin that allows you to use one type of audio content to modulate another type of audio content, and it's most popularly known by making things sound like robots. So the way that it works is you have a MIDI channel playing melodic content. That's this guy right here. It's an M1 doing some strings, which sound like this. Then you have your vocal content, which is over here, and you throw the vocoder on it, and you say, I want to modulate this with an external carrier signal, and you say what channel you want to modulate it from. And in this case, it's this guy right here. And you have a couple other options. You can change the frequency spectrum and how it reacts to the incoming audio. But that's basically it. You set up the routing, and then your strings or drums or whatever the hell it is that's playing on the MIDI channel you choose will become sort of the carrier wave for the vocal, which is modulating the string sound. So it's kind of a cool effect. So I've used that out here and there to support everything. There's a few little vocal effects that I've done throughout. I chopped up one of the main sections of the vocal and used it as a instrument. Okay, so to get this, I selected a part of the vocal and I went down and said slice to new MIDI track. And this will give you some options to slice on the transient, slice on warp markers, you can slice on note divisions, and it will create a drum rack like this, which has slices of the sample. Each slice can be repitched and manipulated however you want. So that's what's going on here. I'm just playing a few of those slices. We got some sidechain compression, and Nectar is providing a big reverb and some other stuff before the compressor. I've talked about this before. I really like to send delays and reverbs into a sidechain compressor or a regular compressor because it squishes that long tail of the effect and sometimes sounds really cool. And that's actually supporting our friendo up here. Yes, simple white noise hits. You just have to select the noise oscillator for your synth. Analog is probably the simplest one to do it in. You don't need two oscillators for it. And then give it a really long release and let the filter release really long. If you want the filter to sweep, you're going to need to turn this down and turn up the envelope reaction to the filter. So right at the tail of that, you can hear that the filter is starting to close down, which is kind of cool. All right, so actually there's two things going on here. It's not just white noise. Oscillator 2 is a sine wave, and I'm using an LFO to modulate its pitch, which is what that wiggy, wiggy, wiggy sound is. And if I turn on the automation for each thing, so I'm modulating the frequency cutoff, I'm opening it up, and I'm modulating the pitch of our oscillator 2 here. You can see that moving right there. In context, there's that white noise kicking in right there. All right, some crashes, nothing really crazy here, just samples. Reverse crashes. Bread and butter shit. Different crashes. Noise sweeps. Can't have a dance track without noise sweeps. More samples sitting around. Just things to help push the track along. finally, I actually dipped into Operator, which is the FM synth in Ableton, because I wanted to create a specific sort of like hit, which presents itself like this. FM synthesis is hairy, and I'm not going to get into it much, but basically you have four operators that can be assigned to different waveforms. You can make a waveform if you want. And then you can use their individual envelopes to have them come in at different levels at different times and process them with filters and all that kind of stuff. FM synthesis, again, is not my forte, but I just wanted to create something that I knew Operator was going to be good at. And that's what I ended up with. I can't really explain what's going on here. It's just, it was experimentation. Operator is an amazing tool, but I'm not an expert at it.
Hold your guns, hold your breath.
All right, well, that's it.
We're never gonna die.
Thank you for joining me. I hope this has been informative. It's certainly been long. But thanks for hanging around. And if you have any more questions about any of this, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. Go check out the remix. I'll put some information in the description and other things where you can find it. Go check out Carter's EP. It's really good. I'm a fan. And yeah, have an excellent day. Thank you.